We welcome our esteemed viewers. It's noon in Kiev, which means it's time for freedom, our time on air. The main news at this hour, in the studio with Valery Klemenko. One person has died and 18 more have been injured as a result of a Russian attack on Zaporizhzhia. Among the wounded are 2 children. The Russians carried out at least 10 strikes across the city. Large-scale fires broke out, with flames engulfing 3 residential buildings and a service station. Nearly 80 rescuers and 17 pieces of equipment have been involved in dealing with the aftermath of the shelling.
It's scary when they shoot down drones, when they're firing. And it was one after another flying in. It's terrible, really frightening. They're shelling us.
As a result of the shelling, most of the windows were shattered, with varying degrees of damage. Inside the building, everything is more or less intact. During the shelling, the school guard was inside the building. Fortunately, he was not injured.
Explosions rang out in Sumy in the morning. At least 5 hits have been recorded there. The attack is ongoing. According to the regional administration, there are no reported casualties so far. In addition, according to the city mayor, at least 3 people were injured in Belkarko as a result of the Russian strikes. Let me remind you, Russian occupiers attacked Sumy with kamikaze drones last night. One of the drones hit a warehouse. A fire broke out there. There were no casualties, reported Serhiy Krivoshenko, head of the Sumy City Military Administration. Part of the city was also left without electricity. All relevant services are working to eliminate the consequences of the attack. Ukrainian forces struck the Saratov oil refinery. The information was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Explosions and a fire were recorded in the area of the facility. The results of the strike are being clarified. The Saratov oil refinery specializes in the production of gasoline, diesel fuel, fuel oil, and more than 20 types of petroleum products in total. In 2023, the processing volume reached almost 5 million tons. The enterprise is involved in meeting the needs of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Explosions have occurred in Russia's Primorsky Krai. The incident took place in the village of Skidoveya, near Vladivostok. A military unit of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade is located in this area. According to Freedom sources and the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, this unit took part in operations against Ukraine. Eyewitnesses report heavy smoke and panic. Rescuers, military personnel, and special services have arrived at the scene. There are reports of dead and wounded among the servicemen. Ukrainian intelligence has announced the conduct of a special operation. The main intelligence directorate emphasizes that the actions were directed against those who committed crimes in Ukraine. Meanwhile, on the territories occupied by Russia and in Ukrainian regions, the humanitarian and environmental crisis in Mariupol is deepening, a city the Kremlin intended to showcase as a symbol of its occupation. Entire neighborhoods still lie in ruins. Russian media have done the math. If the occupation authorities continue working at the current pace, it will take at least 2 decades just to restore the housing stock. And that's not even counting the infrastructure, which in most cases needs to be built from scratch. More on the consequences of the Russian occupation in our next report.
What is the so-called Russian world? People living in territories temporarily occupied by Russia know this firsthand. In the 2.5 months of the siege of Mariupol in 2022, Russian occupiers turned the city on the shores of the Sea of Azov into ruins. Since then, little has changed, even though Kremlin propaganda tries its best to claim otherwise.
What they show on Russian television is just fairy tales for fools. Most of Mariupol still lies in ruins. They repair the facades of buildings on the main streets, where they bring in TV cameras for filming. But just around the corner, there's nothing but ruins and emptiness. Many people still live in half-destroyed apartments with walls that are barely holding up. Oleg is a resident of Mariupol, speaking in an interview with the BBC.
This is how local propagandists report on TV about several families receiving keys to apartments in a renovated building. And this is how the city is shown by local residents on social media. And they complain that, in reality, there's nowhere for people to live.
There's no apartment at home. It's all burned out. Literally. I didn't even take any photos or anything. Absolutely nothing. Everything I had there burned down. There's nothing left. And so for 3 years, I've been waiting with the Chinese, with my grandchildren. I go from apartment to apartment, looking for someone who would take me in just to have a place to stay. But today I'm being kicked out of the apartment where I was staying for a bit, where they let me live for a while.
People here are just at their limit now. It's just extinction, really. Everyone just wants to leave for somewhere else already, because life here is simply unbearable. In addition to housing problems, the population of Mariupol, which is temporarily occupied by Russia, has faced serious disruptions in water supply, just like residents of other cities in the occupied territories of Donetsk region. People are posting videos on social media showing how they stock up on water, which is almost never available.
I've been living in Donetsk for almost a year now. A lot has happened during this time, but now we're facing a water blockade. There's no water in the taps, and in the basement they only give it out once every 3 days.
Please help us survive. How are we supposed to live without water? How are we supposed to flush our toilet? He said on the channel that we should use less. And then everything will be fine. Local residents are holding spontaneous protests, talking about a humanitarian disaster and unsanitary conditions. Meanwhile, the occupiers themselves admit that the issue of water supply in Donetsk and other settlements on the territories occupied by the Russians has not been resolved for years. Russia destroyed the infrastructure of the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, which was the main source of water supply in this part of Donetsk region.
The water supply schedule for the city of Makiyivka is set from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. The water starts flowing at the beginning of the day. In 4 hours, we realized that we can't provide water to all of you 100%.
The Donetsk region has found itself on the brink of a water collapse. Industrial enterprises are barely functioning. The Zaporizhzhia thermal power plant is at risk of shutting down due to a lack of water for cooling equipment. The situation threatens mass power outages and a complete utilities paralysis. This is what the Kalmius River looks like near Starobashevo. Local residents share their experiences. The Russians have dammed the river, which served as a source of water for people and industry.
It used to be all water here. We used to swim deep here. There were islands right here. Now it's just a tiny stream. It's probably only ankle deep now.
Meanwhile, the Russian occupation authorities have already come up with a plan for what to do with the ruins of the captured cities in Donbass. They propose to preserve them and show them to tourists in the future. Because most of the towns in Donetsk region occupied by Russia are beyond restoration. And honestly, the Russians probably won't even try. Natalia Gusu, Academy Stangelov, for Lidim TV channels.
Putin is trying to deceive the U.S. and delay sanctions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this in an interview with Sky News. According to him, the Kremlin dictator is looking for ways to break out of political isolation. The summit in Alaska gave him an opportunity for public dialogue, which, in Zelensky's opinion, opens the door for Putin to participate in other summits and international formats. The president of Ukraine called not to give the Kremlin leaders such an opportunity, because otherwise he will not feel the need to end the war.
He is doing everything possible to avoid sanctions so that the US and Trump do not impose sanctions on him. And if you keep postponing their implementation, then the Russians will be better prepared. He is waging war, and everyone is trying to stop him with arguments and requests. But instead, force should be used. He understands force. That's his language. That's the language he understands. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, in an interview with Sky News.
The war in Ukraine will end in 60 or 90 days if Europe does its part to reduce revenues from Russian oil. This was stated by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in an interview with Reuters. According to him, the Trump administration does not plan to impose additional tariffs on Chinese goods in order to limit Beijing's purchases of Russian oil, unless European countries impose high tariffs against China and India.
We expect the Europeans to do their part, and we will not move forward without the Europeans. I guarantee you that if Europe imposes significant secondary tariffs on buyers of Russian oil, the war will end in 60 or 90 days. Scott Bessent, U.S. Treasury Secretary, in an interview with Reuters.
NATO's Arctic Light 2025 military exercises are taking place off the coast of Greenland. More than 550 military personnel from France, Germany, Sweden, and Norway are taking part. Reuters reports this. The 10-day exercises are aimed at increasing combat readiness in the Arctic region. A Danish frigate, F-16 fighter jets, helicopters, and special operations forces have been involved. France sent an auxiliary vessel, as well as drones and mountain infantry. Germany provided observer groups. During the exercises, soldiers practiced boarding ships, protecting infrastructure, using drones, search and rescue operations, protecting the marine environment, and responding to natural disasters. Israel will not back down until Hamas is defeated. This was stated by Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz. According to him, the main goal of the Israel Defense Forces operation in Gaza City is to create conditions for the release of hostages and the complete destruction of Hamas.
Gaza is burning. The Israel Defense Forces are striking the terrorist infrastructure with an iron fist, and IDF soldiers are bravely fighting to create the conditions for the release of hostages and the defeat of Hamas. We will not surrender or retreat until the mission is accomplished. Israel Katz is the Israeli Minister of Defense on social network X.
The day before, the Israel Defense Forces began a ground military operation to take full control of Gaza. First, the Israeli Air Force carried out massive airstrikes on the city, after which tanks entered the populated area. Last month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the military to seize Gaza. Since then, Israeli forces have been operating on the outskirts of Gaza City for several weeks. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant posted on social network X.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.